and I turned 22 today. Brian, with the roster decisions, Clark Schmidt had a nice spring training, a nice summer camp. What went into that decision in particular? Did you consider keeping him on the roster?
Yeah, he had a great spring training 1.0, and he had a really good spring training 2.0, and he made a run at the roster. But the roster constraints were a concern to some degree, as well as we factored in a little bit of the inexperience that he had, and we just didn't want to make a mistake by going forward early in the event that he wasn't fully finished off. So we wanted to give him a little bit more time and give us a little bit more time, and sample size played a role in it. And but the roster limitations and how it could domino into others, certainly played a role into it for us.
Brian, do you kind of breathe a sigh of relief that there is actually going to be an opening day tomorrow in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a lot of work by a lot of people, and I'm really proud of our players and our staff and the discipline and the commitment they've had to get us this far. And, really appreciative of the fact that we have an opportunity to do some work where obviously other people within this country, this great country of ours, are struggling to find work or be allowed to return to work. And so we feel really fortunate. We want to take advantage of that opportunity by honoring our fans with some great baseball, and hopefully we can do that and take advantage of the 60-game schedule and see if we can achieve our goal, which is a championship.
Thank you, Brian.
Happy birthday.
We'll take the next question from Brian Hoke. Brian, go ahead.
Hey, Cash. You mentioned the discipline and commitment. What did you think of the protocols that were put in place, and how were you guys able to keep your players healthy through summer camp, with the exception of Chapman?
Well, they're very extensive in some ways, and in other ways, when you're away from the park, you have no control, so to speak, and so you're hopeful that people are staying disciplined. I feel definitely comfortable, or more comfortable, of being a part of this group because even myself, I'm participating in the every 48 hours saliva testing. We have a medical staff at our disposal, which is fantastic. I got to give a big shout out to Dr. Paul Lee, who's one of the best internists in the country, and he operates out of New York Presbyterian, and he, has got a busy schedule already given the COVID experience, but yet he's also one of our team physicians and becoming, someone that deserves a lot of credit, because anything and everything he's been able to do, he drops, when he can, to help assist us in this camp and trying to provide us great health and expertise. So, he's got his full-time gig, and then he's got his Yankee gig, and the Yankee gig has kept him busy. And I don't know how he finds time to sleep, why he cares for doing his regular job and then doing the job with us at the same time. So he's been a special person through this, along with our trainers and strength and conditioning people to get us as far.
Thank you.
Ron Blum, go ahead. You have the next question.
Brian, after watching spring training 1 and 2 and having a chance to analyze all the medical and training changes you put in place during the offseason, what are the areas that you've seen change that you're happy with, and what are the areas where there's still no evidence that what you want, that you have to see more to make sure that what you intended is what's going to come through?
Well, we're certainly excited about the personnel we have, and we're very hopeful that they're going to play a real impact role, a really positive impact role for us. But it's so early in the stage of this new team and the transition to the new team. They're building their relationships, their methodology and philosophy is being shared and implemented, and the attempted buy-in with our players. So that's going to take some time. And I think it's going really well and really smooth, at least on the very beginning of this process, but we're really in the infancy stage. So it's way too early to assess or judge or do anything other than the fact that we've got new personnel with new programs, and they're still in the educational component and implementation stage and sharing stage and buy-in stage. And fingers crossed over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll have a really good feel for, if we found higher ground or not. We believe we're on that path, but it's really premature to be judging after, an abbreviated spring training 1.0 or a 3-week spring training 2.0.
In addition to the amount of injuries, what are the various factors you use to evaluate what you're looking for?
Well, there's a lot of so many that it's hard to go through. I can tell you we've gone the amount of communication, the amount of personnel, whether it's from the clinical side to the technological side, both in-house and outside the organization, the level of conversations we've continued to have to try to integrate our new medical team in with, while at the same time, raising the caliber of understanding with our field staff and how their importance of being involved with the performance science team, or the performance team, I would say, not performance science, but the performance team, which would represent the trainers, the strength coaches and stuff, and how they all are integrated and go hand in hand together in their programs. It's vitally important. So I think we've gotten to such a level, but I can't really peel the onion for you going through all the different levels of that evaluation process or implementation process. But it's pretty significant, and it's a big time challenge. And unfortunately, COVID stuff shut us down for a period of time. But the real work goes, in the trenches with their engagement with the players and the staff. And I think it's going extremely well. But it's just going to take some time to allow it to really grow into its significance that we think it can have.
Christy Acker, go ahead. You have the next question.
Hey, Brian, I'm just curious, since we don't know a lot about COVID-19, how do you deal with players that are going to, or how do you accommodate roster spots and such for players who might test positive, for instance, Chapman? How has that changed how you approach that?
Well, obviously he's quarantined, and so he, in his case, and he thankfully permitted us to share that he was COVID positive after he was cleared to enter the facility. So he developed it while he was in-house. So we did the contact tracing for at least, I think it was up to 15 people for a good 7 straight days of testing, and thankfully they all cleared and were negative, so we didn't have an outbreak on site. And in the meantime, he's been quarantined at his residence here in New York, and the trainers stay in touch with him as well as the doctors. He's been getting repeated testing, and until he gets 2 negative tests that come back, and so far clearly he's been testing positive since he's been diagnosed. That's the process we're in, and if there was anything significantly medically going on with him, he would get the care necessary, as he's mostly symptom free. It's more of a waiting game, just like prior to our camp opening. You had Sessa and LeMahieu, both one in Michigan and one in Arizona, dealing with their COVID diagnosis and waiting to get their negative test, but they were for the most part symptom free without issue. They were home, quarantined, waiting, and just staying in touch with our personnel. I'm not sure if that's the question you're asked or not, but I think I answered it.
I'm just curious how it changes your job, though, in terms of preparing, because this could happen at any time.
Well, that's where the depth comes in. I mean, so obviously it's nice to have right away. We're excited about the team we have, but we're not at full strength. I'm sure nobody ever is, regardless of whether it's COVID or various other ailments or injuries. But we enter Washington, D.C. here without our star closer. But the depth of this franchise is going to be tested once again right out of the gate, and that's where Zach Britton comes into play. So we have a lot of players on this roster that are capable of a lot of different roles, and more so than ever, we're going to be asking or leaning on those players to step up into roles that sometimes that they're maybe not used to. But in this case, Zach Britton's obviously done this before. So, hopefully it'll serve us well. The last few years, we've been unfortunately having to tap into various aspects of this roster depth, and it's, stepped up and paid dividends. And so right out of the gate here in the COVID world, we're going to be asking, for our bullpen to get reconfigured because we're waiting on Chappie to return. And then also we're waiting on Sessa to return. As he, he's got to finish off. He's healthy. He's clearly back in the fold in terms of COVID negative, but we just have to finish him off properly. So that means another opportunity for somebody else within the bullpen and a different choice for Aaron Boone and Matt Blake to gravitate to when they're evaluating, choices down to that bullpen when certain, aspects of the lineup, come up and play during these games coming up.
Thank you.
George King, go ahead. You have the next question.
Hey, Brian, it's been a long time since you signed Cole. Can you talk about what it finally means to see him in your uniform in a real game?
Well, with this weather, I don't know. It might be a little longer, but now it'll be exciting. But that excitement gets diminished because there's another Garrett Cole-like starter on the other side of the fence in a different uniform facing us in Scherzer. So it's going to be a great matchup or prize fight, so to speak. So I look forward to seeing those guys go toe to toe. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. Obviously, clearly Garrett Cole is an exciting talent. He's been focused, he's been relentless in terms of his preparation. Even, when spring training stopped, he never has stopped. He's been, preparing for this day for quite some time. And I'm sure in his words, I know I didn't hear his Zoom call that you had before, but he has been doing everything in his power to put himself in the position to be extremely successful for this franchise and try to get out on the gate on the highest level he possibly can. Recognizing though that, that's all you can do is put yourself in those type of positions, do all the work, and then what will be. And, but it's going to be exciting to see him toe the rubber as a Yankee in a real game for the first time. And hopefully it'll be as soon as tomorrow, weather permitting, and hopefully the results will follow. And if they don't follow early, they'll follow regardless because he's that type of caliber player.
And, Brian, are you in DC? Are you planning to come?
I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm at the team hotel. I did not come over because the storm that hit when I was trying to get into a cab. I decided to pull the plug after the storm hit.
Take the next question from Andy Martino.
Hey, Brian, in terms of both depth and potential, where does this year's roster, at least on paper, sort of rank for you among the ones that you've overseen as a GM? I know you don't really like to ever feel satisfied with what you have, but if you take a long view of what this team looks like compared to others over the past couple decades.
Well, I've been a GM now for like 22 or 23 years, and this is definitely by far the best 30-man opening day roster I've ever put forth.
Fair enough.
So,
and
yeah,
if you were to step away from that and compare it to some of the 25s that you've had.
Well, it's hard to compare because I haven't seen it play out. I mean, it's talented. There's no doubt about it. It's got a great deal of talent. I think I think we've got a lot of strengths both on the offensive and the defensive and the pitching side, both starting and bullpen. So I think we're covered in a lot of different ways. It's an exciting team that I think our fans should really be invested in. And I certainly hope we can honor, their investment in us by, showing them what we're really capable of, even if it's a short sprint. And so it's premature for me to kind of match it up with some other rosters, but I think it has a chance of matching up with most of any because of the character of this club and the talent combined. I can tell you and I'm sure you've heard this from Aaron Boone on several occasions, but there is definitely a high level of commitment and focus that this group collectively has towards the goal at hand. And the goal is multi-level. It's satisfying the discipline aspect of playing in a COVID environment and finding and being dead serious about finding a way to navigate it in such a way where you come out on the winning end. And so they are really focused on both ends, which is trying to find a way to become the champion of the 2020 COVID season, and obviously clearly by doing so, successfully navigating the protocols so they can stay healthy and be a part of something that everybody could be proud of.
And you think that joining together to adhere to those protocols can create a sense of teamwork or camaraderie that's unique?
I don't know if the protocols itself is going to design to do that. I just think, I kind of feel as I come out of spring training 2.0, I was really proud of how, the crew, worked towards, the implemented system. And it reminded me of when we went off to London last year. Again, there's a lot of unknowns. It was the first experience of playing in Europe and a long flight and a lot of, dealing with, things that were the unexpected that would crop up, and our group, our player group and our staff really just, whatever came their way, they were like, okay, I get it. It's something different. We'll adjust. And nothing really seemed to faze them. They stayed focused on those games and winning those games. And then also at the same time, recognizing they had a responsibility and obligation, for this sport and for the fans to do, whatever was asked of them with a smile on their face while they were doing it. And I feel like they navigated the spring training 2.0 very similarly, with the real laser focus on being professionals, going about it the right way. And then whatever was unexpected that might have come up along the way, they dealt with it, and it didn't deter them. I feel like those are early signs that should serve us well as we, launch into this 60-game sprint. And I'm certainly hopeful that it does. I mean, I've had a lot of dialogue. I've been really appreciative of Zach Britton, who's been so easy to deal with and discuss. Obviously, he's our player rep. And so the connection between, Major League Baseball and the Players Union, I obviously they were clearly having difficulties for an extended period of time trying to find common ground. But, as it extends into the player reps, at least with our situation, I feel like we've had nothing but amazing, healthy dialogue and understanding on both sides of trying to find a way of dealing with the unexpected. And so it's just been a really comfortable conversation of what's the best course to plot next with this new subject matter, and let's collectively do it. And so I really appreciate Zach Britton and the person he is and how he's been, leading on behalf of his union and communicating with us in such a, special way. So I just want to tip my cap to Zach, because not only is he trying to play a season, be a parent and a husband during a COVID environment, he's also having to be a go-between between the Players Association, his teammates, and the union with the club. And so he's got a lot on his plate, but he's done it really well, along with his teammates.
Thanks.
We'll take the next question from Ken Davidoff.
Hey, Cash. Two questions. First of all, just on the train ride today, I'm just curious of these protocols. Were you or Aaron or even Ben performing in any sort of supervisory role to make sure that everything was going properly?
I drove down this morning early, so I was not on the train. I left New York or Connecticut at like 7 a.m. because I had Zoom calls that I had to be on that I was afraid the train was not going to permit me to have. So I had to get here by 11:30. So I was ready for a 12 noon Zoom and then a 2 o'clock Zoom. So I was forced to move ahead of the club. And then we had some of our training / clubhouse personnel also operated and moved ahead of our club in advance too, just to make sure the setup was ready for us in the visiting clubhouse because we had a little time. So I can't speak to how that train went, but yeah, we have personnel that are assigned jobs of implementing or making sure the program that was negotiated and ultimately put in play with this new COVID season, that part of their jobs and responsibilities is to make sure that it's running properly. And then when it's not running properly, to try to address it in real time.
And second question, you over the lot of your time on the job, you really transformed this organizational culture to one of patience, to not one of not overreacting to small sample sizes. And now with a 60-game season as opposed to 162, how much does that impact your mentality and your methodology?
We're about to find out. You know, in reality, you know, I think patience serves you well in a leadership position. But clearly these games are so meaningful, more so than ever, because, you know, getting out of the gate, listen, if we get out of the gate slowly, you're going to hear us all speak to, we have time, but, you know, it's just less time to deal with. So yeah, we're going to have to deal with anything that ails us. We need to probably address sooner than maybe we would have had to in the past, but you also have to remember addressing it in a way, you know, that, you know, recognizes the COVID rules that we have in play. We have a 60-man roster outside of the first options that you start the season with, that you can recall a guy, you know, immediately. There's no 10-day down rule right out of the gate. But then once, if we send somebody down after game one, they're down for 10 days. You can't get them back unless there's an injury, you know, and that's a significant period of time in a 60-game season. So we're still going to have to be careful of how we navigate it. But I recognize that, you know, we're going to have to, you know, deal with this a little bit differently. I even asked the question strategically to our manager recently, is like, you know, with the offense that we're capable of having, are you out of any game? Can you even afford to concede any game? You know, all of a sudden somebody drops a 7 spot on you, and normally you have a Christian you throw to the Lions to come in to finish off the game to eat up innings. But, you know, does that even change your strategy as we move forward? Because, you know, within a blink of the eye, the season's going to be over. You know, and hopefully, you know, we'll be a postseason qualified team, but it's going to move fast. And so I think your point is well taken. We have to be open-minded to make adjustments, or at least consider making adjustments that you normally wouldn't make. And hopefully we're going to be up to that task. And that's why surrounding myself with some amazing, brilliant, you know, scouts and analysts and personnel is really going to serve me well, so I can help, you know, advise and see where it takes us.
Thanks, Cash.
Thanks, Kenny.
We'll take the next question from Mark Carrig.
Hey, Cash. You know, given all the time and energy and resources you've poured into getting all the talent on this team, how do you reconcile that this is a 60-game season and a lesser team could sneak in, knock you guys off, or you guys literally have a bad week and all of that, you know, goes sideways? Like, how do you even deal with that reality like this?
Well, it's the same for everybody. And what will be, will be. Yes, in a smaller sample size, it creates a lot more opportunity, you know, for a good team to be bad and a bad team to be good. You know, I think for the industry, it's great. It's going to create a lot of haphazard circumstances that should keep everybody engaged and excited and locked in, and the coverage will be enormous on the teams that were expected to be good that are struggling, and a lot of really amazing coverage on the teams that are seemingly have come out of nowhere, and so it's going to drive the train of you know, attention to our sport even that much more, probably. So that's all good. How will I personally manage it? I'm just going to personally manage it the way I always am. I'm a pretty even-keeled person. You know, there's good times and bad times that come our way. I try to keep them, you know, I try to keep both of those, you know, in check regardless. And I'm hopeful for us and our fans, and especially for our owner, who's made a financial commitment second to none, as always, that, you know, we are able to deliver what we're capable of I also understand at the same time, while trying to do so, this is a unique environment that with an amazing sport that can produce a lot of interesting results along the way. So I'm just very thankful to be in a position to dream big, and I'm looking forward to seeing if we can make those dreams reality. But I recognize that there's certainly caution signs up everywhere we go, and hopefully we can navigate them to the best of our abilities and find a way to, still come out on top. But you're right. There's definitely this is going to create an opportunity for anybody to step up and do something special. And so I just can't stress enough how much we want that to be us, though.
Thanks, Cash. We'll take the next one from Dave Lennon. Dave, please unmute.
Hey, Cash. Aaron Boone was on here a little bit earlier and was just saying how kind of the message to his team has to be that nothing changes, just in terms of the job, just in terms of the mission. Is that the key here? I mean, this seems like a season that would be easy to make excuses because of so many other things going on, but the Yankees still carry the same weight. You guys are a World Series favorite. Do you guys kind of go into this feeling the weight and the purpose and kind of the mission that you always do for every season?
I think, I'd like to think that we're all in a position where the weight of, and the, whether it's weight, pressure, expectation, that doesn't affect us, because I think none of us would be a part of this if that was a hindrance. I think we're welcoming that. We expect it. We're in this to win it. So the fact that, especially with our players who had a chance to opt out, that they've all opted in, and so they're in it to win it, because that's how they're wired, not just in a COVID season. So I think it's just a band of merry men that honestly are wired the same. They love to compete, and it doesn't matter in any. It's almost like, what's the game, and then find a way to win the game. And so in this particular case, it's a 60 game season. Rain or shine, COVID or not. We got a lot of people in here that are wired the same way, that really just want to, say when the dust settles, we're better than everyone else. And they're thankful and appreciative for having the opportunity to at least try to prove that. And they're looking forward to it. So it is the same that way year in and year out, but I can honestly tell you, it's not always the same. You've been covering us for a long time, and sometimes you get a different feel and a different vibe from one team to another, or of ours, or maybe certain players within that clubhouse mix you might actually get a feel for. That might be a square peg in a round hole. I feel like we have a really good group of people that have been assembled together now for quite some time, with now new additions that are very similar. So I feel like a Garrett Cole addition is a welcome one, not just because of his talent, but because of how his makeup and how he's wired. But these guys have been hungry. They've pushed, the world champions the last few years, to the limit, because they wanted to be world champs. We fell short, but they are still knocking on that door. And so this year we're going to find out if we can, bash it open and walk right through or not. And we're looking forward to that opportunity, and we know what that challenge is. But I do think that focus and the hunger and the character of these guys is going to play a really important role for us if we can stay healthy. I think that serves us well, because it's shown us that time and time again so far in the past.
Thanks, Cash.
Thanks.
We'll take the next one from James Wagner. James, would you please unmute?
Hey, Cash, what's up? I guess just because this conversation has been part of so many workplaces and now baseball teams and sports teams around the world and country. But, what were the two parts, I guess, discussions about like racial injustice and the social issues that maybe you guys had internally there as the Yankees with players? And then the second part would be, if any player of yours, coaches or staff, does some sort of demonstration coming up the next few days, is the culture there for them to do that? And what do you think of the possibility that might happen, as you've seen with other teams already?
Well, obviously when everything was transpiring here, and it feels like a month ago, maybe. I was still in Tampa. I returned to Tampa for a potential spring training 2.0 as well as the amateur draft. So I can't remember the date I got down there, but the Floyd killing took place when I was in Florida, and then the protests that went throughout the country started to occur. And so I can only speak from my personal level. I engaged with Kevin Reese. I engaged a number of our Black employees, whether it was, coaches on our major league coaching staff, whether it was, people within our front office ranks, whether it was, I went over to the minor league side, and a number of our minor leaguers happened to be still in the Tampa area when spring training got shut down. So Kevin Reese, who's our player development director, and Eric Schmidt, who's also director of player development, and myself, and we met with a number of our minor league Black players, and we actually started the conversations that to get a sense for how are they doing, start the communication of what can be done better, how can we be a part of a more positive change, and just having that type of dialogue that's back and forth and running to the national narrative that was occurring, rather than wait for it to come our way, so to speak. But so there was very difficult conversations, real personal stories that were shared, some of which I was already aware of, and some of which from people that I have great relationship with. It was more of a deeper dive and more information that I wasn't aware of. And we as an organization have engaged this current roster during spring training 2.0 already with a conversation that's designed to continue that dialogue of information share to find higher ground, because ultimately, the second part of your question that you're asking is about, the protests that you see in the form of kneeling during the anthem. I believe that's part of your second question.
Yeah, I mean, any sort of demonstration. Yeah, that's
right.
the most common one right now.
Well, obviously that's a manifestation of where our country currently is. Our country is in many ways the greatest country in the world, and in some ways it's broken in certain aspects, but we're not all together, and not all as one as we should be. And because of that, you're seeing demonstrations like kneeling at the anthem as part of that process, because part of our community is hurting, and when it shouldn't be. And if it's been ignored for such a long period of time and it not been addressed as well as it should have been or could have been, then the great part of America is there's different ways to express yourself and different platforms to utilize how you express yourself. And in some cases, it happens to be kneeling during the anthem. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick started that process back 4 or 5 years ago. And now you're seeing it coming to Major League Baseball in a more prominent way, especially after, where our country is coming from in the most recent month or so. So I support the expression of the ability for somebody to protest in the way they see fit, as long as it's obviously in a legal and a healthy way. I think there's nothing more American than being able to express your beliefs and do it in a safe way. And so I'm always supportive of that. But obviously, the most important aspect, I think, of all of that is to make sure that the conversations are had, prior to anybody making those type of decisions. Like, make sure you're making an informed decision. Make sure those conversations are in play or in place where you're going to have a healthy dialogue, and that's what we've tried to do, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do, to make sure that we're doing everything we probably can, and that any of our personnel, for whatever reason, if they so choose to do certain things, they're making those decisions in a very informed manner that allows them the comfort level to express themselves. And so I'm supportive of our people as Americans to support themselves in a way, as long as they're making those decisions in a very informed way. And there's a lot of different platforms that do it. And so, I'm not sure if there's a other aspect to your question to answer. If there is, please follow up.
Oh, no, that's all I wanted to ask. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll take Bradford Davis. Bradford, would you please unmute?
Hey, Brian, good to see you again. So I guess, continuing with, what you mentioned about the dialogues that you had with, people internally, was there anything that was particularly surprising or insightful about someone's experience in your organization that, you took away?
Well, some of the dialogue, having the conversations, in many cases, I've heard the stories already because of my relationships with the people involved. But in some cases, some of the shared information was, the interpretation on certain actions by certain people were misinterpreted, for instance. So for instance, when during our conversations with some of our players from the minor leagues, that because there's systemic racism, you can misinterpret, if you're split up in different groups in batting groups, for instance, maybe our black players thought it was because they were being separated because they're black, when it wasn't really the case. It's because there's systemic racism and the experiences they've had, most of which is very valid, but some of which then, if you're not talking through it or having conversations because of it, then you could have stuff that gets left unsaid that gets misinterpreted. So it was really healthy dialogue, but some of the more personal conversations, like, again, I have a daughter, Grace, and when I was teaching her how to drive, I don't have that extra conversation I have to have because I don't have to teach her, about what to do when you're going to get pulled over, or how to act a certain way but other people that obviously that I'm working alongside with, who are black, they have to have a different conversation that, and having those conversations are difficult to hear. It's having those conversations and listening that, there's that extra step that someone that I care a great deal for has to do from their side as a parent. It's very difficult to hear. And so anyway, but the bottom line is making sure that I certainly try to have an open dialogue, create an atmosphere always, forgetting this obviously subject matter that's so vitally important, but just generally, I've always tried to preach with and create the culture of, listen, if you have a suggestion, if you think there's something we can do better, if there's something that bothers you, and I'm talking about just generally, whether it's the development of a player or a trade concept or how a meeting was run, or just anything. I try to empower all our personnel to make sure that that this is a safe environment that you can feel free to share and confront and discuss, so we can find higher ground. And so at least the dialogue that I was having with at least some of our minor league players, I got a lot of information, and some of which were, I thought, helpful for them as well as helpful for me.
Thank you. And, I guess, still on that note, I remember about a year ago, you had a really scary experience with the police yourself, with them even drawing weapons on you. And, fortunately, of course, you're here, but the police apologize, but, many people aren't. But I do remember you said this, the quote, if you are stopped, just do what you were told and it would all work out. Has the events from this year, including the killings of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, et cetera, your conversations changed your perspective on that encounter?
No, I do believe that if you get stopped, you need to follow the directives of the police. I don't think that, if you're pulled over like I was at that moment, and the video didn't show, but I think there was 5 cars. The video showed the one police officer's body cam, and there was 2 police in each car, and they all had their guns drawn on me. I think some were tasers, others were handguns, and I was being ordered directly to do certain things, and I certainly did everything they asked me to do, because obviously I was, my blood was pumping pretty heavy, and I was fearful at that moment in time, because it's certainly not an experience I'm used to, my comments back then, which is, do what you're told, I think will serve you well. I think if you obviously try to resist or run, something really uncomfortable could happen, or bad clearly could happen. And I don't see how I would ever change that advice to anybody if they're confronted with being, pulled over by the police. And in their case with me, they were running my car. For people who don't know, my car came up as stolen, and they hadn't taken it off the stolen vehicle list. And so they thought I had stolen that car, and they didn't know who I was. And so they were protecting themselves. And until they secured the scene and knew there was nobody else or a danger to them, they weren't going to stand down until they had all those answers, and until I was acting the way they wanted me to act. And so I would strongly recommend moving forward that regardless.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian. We'll have more information via